Hey guys, welcome to episode 5 of the LinuxCNC tutorial series. In the top right corner of your screen, you'll see a card that you can click on to find the playlist for this series. And in this video, we're going to go over the INI file in your configuration directory. So as you'll recall, in the last video, we ran the step-gen config and we created a configuration folder that had several files in it. And the INI file is the one that helps describe the machine itself, whether it's a mill, a lathe, a router, etc. And then also it lets you change a little bit in the LinuxCNC user interface. So we're going to make some changes that are going to affect both of those. One thing I would suggest is taking a look at the LinuxCNC documentation. Section 6.2 is the INI configuration if you're running LinuxCNC version 2.7.0. And you can get here by going to the Applications menu, CNC, and then LinuxCNC documentation. You'll notice it's quite large. We're on page 331 of 738. So the INI file is broken down into 3 categories. There's comments, sections, and variables. And let me go ahead and pull that up so we can take a look at it. There are 2 ways you can get there. When you ran the step config wizard, if you created shortcuts to your desktop, you can go ahead and double click the folder and it will open up your configuration folder. And here's the INI file. You can also get there by going home, LinuxCNC, configs, Rust Mill is our config directory. And then there again is the INI file. One thing I would suggest you do when you're just starting out, and it's probably good practice anyway, for those of you who aren't just starting out, is to create a copy of your INI file to ensure that if you need to, you can go back. So anytime you make changes, it might be a good idea to make a copy first. That way you don't brick your configuration. So I'm going to hit Control-C for copy, Control-V for paste, and then you can see up here a copy of Rust Mill INI. We're going to rename this because I hate it when it creates these copy of directories. We're just going to rename this to INI old, and now we have a backup. Let's go ahead and open the INI file, and you can see here the 3 categories I mentioned, which are comments that have a pound in front of them, sections, which are in braces, and then variables, which is anything to the right of an equal sign. So the sections that we're going to actually edit are going to be the display section, and then we're going to edit the axis sections. So you'll see there's axis 0, which is our X, axis 1 is our Y, axis 2 is our Z. So let's go ahead and scroll back up here, and we're going to do one little edit up front just to show you how easy this is. So the thing we're going to change is the grids section. And you'll see here that we have 10, 20, 50, and 100 millimeters, 1, 2, 5, and 10 inches. And what this corresponds to is if we go up here to view and then grids, you'll see that we have all of those options in here. Now, there's no grid on the screen. You'll see I have 1 inch selected, but if I come to one of these straight on orthogonal views, orthogonal, whichever, you'll see our 1 inch grid squares, and we can come up here to grid and change this to something like 2 inches, or we can even type in a custom 2.5 inches, and now you'll see we have those grids. Now, I don't really use these, but we're going to make an edit anyway, and for me, it means we're going to delete the millimeter options. So if we hit delete, we've now made a change, and you'll notice up here at the top, there's an asterisk next to our file name. That means it's unsaved. So we're going to hold down Control and hit S for save, and then if we come back over here, you'll notice that nothing changed. All of those options are still available. And the reason is anytime you make a change to one of your config files, you need to exit out of LinuxCNC, relaunch it, and once it's launched, we can come back up here. Control space to get rid of warnings. We can come up here to view, grid, and now you can see the millimeter options are gone. So pretty easy, not too scary, and you're probably going to want to make some changes in here. Let's go ahead and make a few other changes just for fun. Maximum feed override is one of my favorite things to change, and this 1.2 corresponds to a multiplier of your feed override. So you'll notice we can go to 120%. Now, personally, I like to run mine at 200%, so we're going to change this to a 2.0. Also, 300% you may find being really useful. So come back in and change this and set it as high as you like for whatever works well for you. Min spindle and max spindle override, we're going to leave those alone. Default linear velocity, this is in inches per second, so 0.3 equates to 17 inches per minute. So this is the default, just means when you turn on LinuxCNC, this was what it's going to be set at. So for mine, we're going to limit this to what is ultimately going to be the machine's top speed, which is 1.67 inches per second or 100 inches per minute. So we're going to go ahead and click this, and then we're also going to apply it to max linear velocity. We're going to leave our minimum velocity at 0. Program prefix. This is really handy, and you'll notice it points to an nc_files directory. If we come back over here and we go to home, LinuxCNC, and then when we get to our config directory, you'll see this is where the NC files directory is. So I would actually link mine to this directory because I like to have it on the desktop. I don't remember what the file path is for the desktop, so I'm not going to change that right now. But just so you know, this is where you will change it. And this is handy because anytime you go to open a new file, it's going to default to that directory. So you do want to change it so that it is set to wherever you save your files. You'll notice that for me, I have a lathe subdirectory and a mill subdirectory, and I put the appropriate files in those two directories. The other thing we can change is increments, and you'll see we have 0.1 inches, 0.05, well, we have a bunch of them, and that corresponds to this menu right here, which is grayed out. We need to turn the machine on by clicking override limits for now. We're going to turn off the e-stop, turn on the machine, and now you'll notice we have those same increments available to us. Now, me personally, I jog continuously up to whatever I'm trying to get to. Then I jog more slowly at 5,000 increments, and then I touch off or jog ultimately at 1,000 increments. I don't need anything more coarse or fine than that, but feel free to change it and select whatever you think will be easy. You can come back in again and change this anytime you like. Filters, tasks, and this other stuff we're going to leave alone. And we're going to jump down here to the x-axis. So you remember in the step config wizard in the last video, we only configured the x-axis, but we're going to make some changes here. We have home set to the 0 location. So if we come look over here, that's this corner in the x-axis, as opposed to having it in the center of our travel or way over here on the far right of our travel. So we're going to leave that at 0. We're going to set max velocity at 1.67. Again, we're going to limit our machine to 100 inches per minute. Max acceleration we set in the step config wizard as 15 inches per second squared. We're going to leave that alone. And the documentation doesn't really say much about stepgen max accel, other than it should be somewhere between 1 and 10% greater than the max accel. Now, you would expect that to be no higher than 16.5, as 1.5 would be another 10% over 15. But for some reason, it's at this weird number, which seems arbitrary to me, and we're just going to leave it alone. Scale is our steps per inch. There happens to be 8,128 based on my screw and microstepping setup. We have min limit and max limit. This is if you have, these are actually your soft limits, which is this red box. We're going to leave those the same for the x-axis, that's fine. And then we're going to come down here to the home search velocity. Now, if you have a home switch, when you're searching for that home, you're going to be searching at this velocity here. So we want to search at the machine highest velocity, which means when we tell it to home the x-axis, it's going to go to home at this speed. Now, if you'll remember also, we set our latch direction to same, which is this home sequence 1. And that means that we're going to move up to our home switch, trigger it, then we're going to back away at this speed, then we're going to trigger it again at this speed. So I do like to leave this speed quite low, and we're going to leave that as it is, except we're just going to delete these trailing zeros. Down here for axis number 1, pretty much everything the same. We can delete these trailing zeros if we want. We can also just come up here and copy this entire section and paste it and do the same for the Z. Again, we didn't configure the Y and Z when we did the configuration wizard. As far as max velocity is concerned, let's say we want all 3 axes to be the same. So let's go ahead and change that. And then for the Z, the one thing I didn't like was that it put my 0 up here at the top. I prefer to have my 0 down here. So what we'll do here is we'll change min limit to 0. And we're going to change max limit to, let's say I have 7 inches of travel. We'll change it to 7.0. We're going to Control S to save, move back over here to this workspace, close LinuxCNC, Yes, we do want to close it. Relaunch it. Yes, we do want to relaunch it. And now we should see the rest of our changes. Control space to clear out the warnings. And you'll notice that we're now at the bottom of the Z travel, which is what I wanted. We have the full 7 inches of Z travel, which is also what I wanted. If we override limits, turn off the e-stop and turn on the machine, you'll now see that we have our increments at 5,000 and 1,000, which is what we wanted. By the way, you can change this by clicking I on your keyboard and scrolling through, and then Shift and I will let you scroll back. You can hit C at any time to change this to continuous. Down here, we now have our feed override at 200%. We have our jog speed by default at 100 inches per minute, which is just what we wanted. And I think that might be all the changes that we made. So the next video is going to cover one of the HAL files. Specifically, we're going to edit out the line that says we have limit switches. What you're looking at here is LinuxCNC being run inside of a virtual box on a Windows 10 computer, and we don't have limit switches set up because you can't run LinuxCNC in a virtual box and control a machine. So we want to turn this off so that we don't constantly get these limit out warnings. And let me show you what those look like. If we go ahead and hit play, it's going to ask us if we want to exceed our machine maximum on the Z. We'll say fine, we'll run it anyway. And then because the machine thinks we have limits, we get these errors down here, and then nothing actually happened. So that's going to be the first change we make when we get into the main machine HAL file. There are other HAL files that we'll probably talk about in the next video as well. If you guys have questions or comments, please post them below. If there's something you would like to see a LinuxCNC video made about, let me know in the comments section as well. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next video.